Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Newsmakers TV. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, the 13th of June, for those who celebrate. I'm delighted to
Oh,
welcome back for
yeah, get out of here.
a special Three Amigos edition. My colleagues, Nick Welsh of the Santa Barbara Independent, Josh Molina of the Santa Barbara Talks podcast, and also Newshawk. And this is, fellas, a very, very special episode because it is, in fact, episode 501 of Newsmakers slash City Desk. I had originally planned to have us three together to talk about episode 500, but events overtook us, and I stumped you both with my exclusive interview with Monique Limón. So that superseded. But I did just want to take a moment for mawkish sentimental commentary to say I how much I appreciate and thank both of you who have been here from the beginning with the show. And even though the pay has been, yeah, admittedly low, your reporting and writing and insights and analysis and commentary have formed the backbone of the program for the beginning. And for that, Hap and I and all three of our viewers are extremely grateful to you, and I personally thank you both very much.
Will you even take us out for lunch?
No,
Take us
no,
out for drinks?
no, no. But if you'd
I think
like
it's so sweet.
anytime you'd like to come up here for a cup of coffee so you can shovel some horse shit, though, please,
Okay. Hey,
please.
I can shovel horse shit right down here. I have a do and will.
It's sort of what we do for a living,
Well,
you know.
Jerry, the pay may not have been great, but the massive street credibility that this show has brought me inside Lazy Acres and Gelson's when I'm shopping. Hey, aren't you on Jerry's show? I mean, that has meant a lot, and that happens more often than you think.
Well, it's funny you say that, Josh, because I'm always surprised and struck by how many people watch the show and sort of how hungry people are for any kind of news or what masquerades as news. Um, it's not like always the usual suspects. Like, certain elected officials who want to make sure we don't get their name wrong. But when they go to the Sansom clinics, the person that's there, I saw you on that show. And
That's funny. We Hap and I have made various attempts to figure out what our audience actually is. We got about 2,000 newsletter subscribers and I don't know, 500 YouTube subscribers, dwarfed by Josh's YouTube channel. But and
The
then
doomer on regularly. Huh?
the six people who still watch channel 17, we've got them, and the two people who listen to KCSB, we've got them. So I have no idea. I do know that no one will ever admit to me to watching the show. Even though they all seem to know exactly what's on it. We name no names, Das Williams. What? So anyway, it's been great, and
Anyone on the Democratic Central Committee board never watches the show, but seems to be
never.
able to quote line for line what
And the
was
other
said.
thing I want to mention is that TV Santa Barbara, who's been a great partner to us in various forms, is having their 50th anniversary tonight. So kudos to them.
oh
And one of
wow,
the people that's getting honored is our very own Hap Freund,
oh well,
who
he deserves.
was, yes, the executive director of TV Santa Barbara when it became a public access show. You may remember 2002 or whenever when David Edelman of Cox spun it off. So I don't know, probably to save taxes or something, knowing Edelman. But that was Hap's project. That's why he was hired in town.
Oh, okay,
And
I didn't know that.
he's hired a lot of talent over there, including the great JP Montalvo and of course Oscar Gutierrez, our very first director. You notice the show really took off after Oscar went and got elected to the city council. But anyway, okay, let's get to the news. Lots of news this week. Civilization is collapsing. as we speak. The events obviously in LA, which continue apace. There's been some local connections to that. Nick, you have an interesting poodle, which I urge everyone to read, about the different that both Sheriff Bill Brown and Police Chief Kelly Gordon, who put out public statements about this, and of course we have a big day of protest coming tomorrow, and God knows what's going to happen then. But the very different tone that they each struck. Talk about that a little. Say a word about it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, obviously, so there's a press release by Bill Brown, the sheriff, and one by Kelly Gordon, the police chief. And Kelly Gordon kind of starts off, and first of all, it's sort of written almost like a fireside chat. And I'm talking to you over a really serious issue, and she writes it, and it's written in Spanish and English, which was
it's very personal.
It's very personal, and she's talking about, I know you people, a lot of people are going to want to protest, and protest is one of our constitutional rights, and it's really sacred. And whether you want to protest about diversity or, income inequality, and these are highly charged words right now in the era of Trump, where the federal government isn't allowed, employees working for the federal government are not allowed to utter those words on their typewriters or their word processors. And it was but the point was, what she got down to was, by the way, we're asking you, please protest peacefully. And if you don't, well, we're going to have to do something. But it was really kind of like, don't be jerks. But we understand why people are upset. And there was an inclusiveness and an embraciveness that was really quite moving. It was like, okay, it wasn't like the chief up in Seattle saying, I'm, defy orders. But it was
Santa Barbara appropriate.
It was Santa Barbara appropriate. Bill Brown, sheriff, who was very big in statewide and national sheriff's organizations. It was really, I'm here to announce that 32 of our deputies have been consigned, are going to be going down to LA. They're going down as part of a mutual aid organization. And he didn't acknowledge that there was, and he said, these are not peaceful protests. This is not a peaceful exercise of the First Amendment. These people are targeting property. They're targeting law enforcement officers. Now, that did happen, but that was, by any of the accounts I've read and have been trying to read a lot, those are definitely the minority. There is violence that's going to go up and down and wax and wane, but it has been, by and large, mostly peaceful, and the violence has been contained in certain areas. And so to sort of characterize it like that seemed to miss the whole point. Bill Brown, I just wanted to remind people, I mean, there was no reach out to, the immigrant community. Like, hey, people might be feeling a little freaked out here. And I was disappointed, and I thought that it's important to recognize who lives in our community and who is part of our community when you do these things. But when Bill Brown was first elected, way, way back in the Pleistocene era, he was running against an established incumbent who made the stupid mistake of saying he thought his deputies ought to cooperate with ICE agents. I don't know if it was ICE at that point even, but Bill Brown, who at that point was a chief of Lompoc and sort of a long shot, he was really smart, and he seized on this. He made a big deal of it, and he reached out to the liberals and Democrats saying, you know what, immigrants are part of our community. It's really important for us that they trust us, whether or not they're here legally or not. Law enforcement cannot do its job well if they are afraid of us. And, victims of crimes will go unprotected. It was quite moving. And then he brought out the fact that, what's his name, Ramirez, the Hillside Strangler in LA, very big deal for a long time. Mass murder. It was illegal immigrants, to use that loaded term, who chased him down in LA, tackled him, and turned him over to the cops. And Bill Brown made a big deal of that. And I kind of wish that Bill Brown of today was listening to the Bill Brown of yesterday.
Well, Sheriff Brown and Chief Gordon are two of the vast slice of humanity who insist they never watch the show. So hopefully they'll get the message. Josh, the other thing Bill Brown didn't mention is that there's a bunch of masked guys in armored vehicles that show up at Home Depot. And maybe that might be enough to set people off too. But I mean, some of the images that we've seen, the farm workers being chased across fields at Oxnard, those ICE agents, masked ICE agents in LA. And yesterday, the spectacle of U.S. Senator Alex Padilla
Oh my God.
being manhandled at a press conference by ICE Barbie or whatever her name is, Christy Nome. And it was enough to even make Salud Carbajal, the last man on earth who still uses the word bipartisanship in a serious, without irony, to crack yesterday and to tell the department, that Pentagon secretary to get the hell out, and he was unfit and a lot of other things.
I think just to go to that, one of the questions.
Let Josh jump in here.
Oh, I'm sorry, Josh. I apologize.
There is a question at the end of my soliloquy, I'm sure.
I was enjoying listening to Nick too,
but John, no, I mean, just say a word, if you will. I mean, we are, I think, lucky, and as Nick points out, we do live in a majority or a plurality Latino area, to be represented by members of that community, and we're going to talk about Monique Limón and her big achievement this week. But what just talk a little bit about what you're feeling as you watch all this.
Well, I need to stay off social media because what I'm finding is that there's such a disconnect between what is happening on the ground versus the perception that a lot of people have. This idea that there are riots in Los Angeles, that they're looting and burning things down is just horrible. It's terrible. And none of this would have happened if the National Guard didn't show up. And so I take a sort of a step back on all this. And at the end of the day, it just reinforces the racist attitudes that people have toward Latinos and Hispanics and predominantly Mexican Americans in this area, because it starts to create a division of the good ones versus the bad ones among people who have no real specific knowledge of that community. I mean, my father was a legal immigrant, right? I am the son of a legal immigrant. He was a kid when his parents brought him into the country, okay? He didn't have any say in the matter. And there are so many people who think that it's easy to just walk across the border, and they don't understand that no one would walk across, or no one would try to come to the United States if they weren't trying to improve their lives because of the terrible poverty conditions in their country. Every one of us, it's human nature. We would try to make a better life for us and our families, no matter what we had to do. That's what we have to do. And so this idea that these are criminal immigrants, or that all of these people are, members of the cartels or something, is just, it's not even, it's just sad that that is the perception that some people have. And the idea that we don't rely on immigrants, whether legal or illegal, to cook our food, to clean our homes. Well, not my house, but a lot of people have housekeepers. And to obviously out in the fields, it's horrible, and I have, Hispanic, Mexican American children, and it creates this like double take that people have at you. And where do you stand? And are you a good one? Or are you a bad one? And that is what's like horrible about all of this too. And I think it's hard for people to to understand that unless you're in those shoes. So when I think of the Home Depot, when I think of just everyday people, and I grew up with these people. I don't talk much about my personal life because I think people already had enough of me. But I grew up in Pershing Park, in Alameda Park, with my father, hanging out with homeless people. My father was homeless for a large degree when I was a kid. Many of them, immigrants, Mexican immigrants, illegal immigrants. I learned to play poker in the park and cards. These people are not people who are harming our country. In fact, they're working harder than a lot of people with 2, 3 jobs, getting up early in the morning. These are not people to fear. They're just like us. And just because maybe people don't speak their language or they're not culturally in the same circles, they're just like you. They have the same feelings and emotions. And so when I read Sheriff Bill Brown's press release, I was sort of angry. And I like Bill. Like when I see Bill, he's a nice guy, and he's a good guy. He's very friendly. But the idea that he says these protests were anything but peaceful is just feeding the fire because, yes, there are, as Nick said, some of that going on, but it's the minority. And I have not seen any like attacks on citizens. It's like defense tactics to a large degree. And then I read Kelly Gordon's. I was like, wow, this chief is cool. I mean, she makes everybody feel included, and it's a statement. So I think that's what I think about. It's not a intellectual social media game for me like it is for a lot of people who post their memes or post some link and say, look how bad it is. Like it's a thing that's very real. And I have my grandfather came in here illegally, then became citizens. They all became citizens. And I think I contribute to this community pretty well. And my
I don't know.
cousins and
We can probably discuss that. I'm not sure that's a.
yeah, but my point is, like, it's just we can't have these two-layer divisiveness of good ones and bad ones, and
Well,
it's hurtful, it's harmful. Padilla, oh my God, I watched that video. That was insane. This guy's getting handcuffed. He's thrown on the floor, and then it took the aid of that woman to go in there and actually help him. That's how bad it was. So yeah, I mean, I don't.
and the idea that the Homeland Security chief doesn't know who Alex Padilla is. She served in that. She knows very well who she was, or the U.S. attorney who stood next to him, who served with Alex for many years in sec. It's just an outrage, Nick. Say, I do want to ask you specifically though about Gene's story. Gene has a little piece up with the video of Salud's head exploding yesterday in the at a House committee hearing with Pete Hegseth. I mean, just that event in and of itself speaks volumes about the moment we're in.
No, I mean, the fact that Salud Carbajal would say, you're not worth it for me to even ask you the question. I'm not even going to ask you the question anymore because you're not worth it. And just get the hell out of here and let somebody competent come in. That is so not Salud Carbajal. It may be what he thinks, but it's not what he says. But I think the trigger point, and a bad pun here, he asked, Salud Carbajal makes a big deal of the fact that he was in the Marine Reserves. So he knows how Marines are trained. And he asked Hegseth, would the Marines, the 700 who were allegedly coming from 29 Palms and are going to be put on patrol, would they be firing warning shots? And his answer was no. That was the one straight answer Salud could get out of him. He said, yeah, see, that wasn't so hard, was it? Because he was just giving all this mealy-mouthed BS for all the other ones. But that was really quite chilling. And he didn't seem at all perturbed. There are going to be no warning shots. The Marines are famously trained for combat. They are not trained for crowd control. They are not trained for de-escalation. And obviously, this is an inflamed situation. Going back to Padilla, the question he wanted to ask, he interrupted that meeting to ask a question. The question was, she had this picture of guys, Mexican immigrants in the back, mugshots. And he was trying to ask, how many of the people that you have picked up have actually had criminal records? And I think what I've read, the numbers are pretty low. It's sort of a handful compared. I mean, there's some, and I'm not minimizing, but this is not a surgical thing. This is a dragnet to scare the hell of everybody who happens to have brown skin. You are presumed illegal if you are not white. And it was when he was asking that question that you had these, security guys, FBI agents, doing sort of the Philadelphia Eagles push on him, and they were pushing him out. But once you get him out in the hall, let's say you close the door and you stand in front of it. No, they took him down on the ground. They put his nose on the carpet. They brought his hand up behind him and they handcuffed him. Well, all the while saying, "Sir, it was an act of premeditated humiliation."
Yeah. And I'm gonna not be surprised if we find some of these characters who were all involved in this were also, assaulting the Capitol on January 6th. But Josh, another of our local officials who got thrown in the middle of this, of course, Governor Newsom, Attorney General Rob Bonta have sued Trump or have sued the government about sending in the National Guard. They won at the district level. Now it's on hold at the Court of Appeals, whatever. But in the middle of that, State Senator Monique Limón, our very own Monique Limón, seen on an early edition of Newsmakers TV as a school board member running for the assembly many years ago. Anyway, has now been elected the next Senate President pro tem of the state Senate. It's a big deal. It's one of the 3 top elected offices in Sacramento. I mean, it's kind of sad. I talked to her yesterday. I mean, it's a little bit wistful, I mean, it would have been nice to have a little minute to celebrate or have this, be sort of recognized for the historic event, which it really is, first Latina in California history. But now she's immediately thrust into the middle of this. You were early on, kind of reporting on the smoke signals that this was going to happen. How do you think that's being read in Santa Barbara? What do you think it means for the state? Talk a little bit about her and her politics and what your take on it is.
Yes, well, Monique Limón has risen to the occasion in every political office that she's held, and it's amazing. Like she went to Cleveland Elementary School, and I think she went to Harding, and then she went to Santa Barbara High. She spoke yesterday at the graduation at Santa Barbara High, and she's a real classic success Santa Barbara story. And of course, I have these, this deference or not preference, but I love locals who make it big, who do well and go on to great things. And she's from this incredible family. Like there's I don't know how many Gills there are, but they're all super like incredible contributors to the community, business owners, super educated. And Monique Limón from Santa Barbara Unified School District to the Assembly to the Senate. She is this shining star. And so here she is at this moment, and we're going to see how she's able to rise to the occasion. It's so much pressure. She doesn't take that seat till January. Who knows what the world's going to look like in January? There's a lot of expectations of her locally. She is somebody who is very effective, obviously, in Sacramento. And so we have to see, but I mean, if you're a betting person, I think Monique's the perfect person in this moment to not only defend California. She is a Latina. She's the first Latina to hold this position. She's absolutely in touch with most of Californians and their values. And she's somebody who, in this community, like we're going to carry her forever as far as she'll go, because she has that potential to do that. So I think it's an exciting time, and I think that we're going to see what she's able to do on the ground in terms of pushing back against the federal administration and I have no reason to believe she won't be able to rise to the occasion. And it's just phenomenal. I mean, I remember covering her on the school board. I remember when she was appointed the first time, and it was like, wow. And now here she
How
is.
many superintendents ago was that? Yeah. Hey, Nick, you and I were talking offline this week about the, kind of, what difference does it make? What are her politics notably different than the guy she's replacing, Mike McGuire from up north? I do think she's kind of more of on the progressive side of environmental issues, climate issues, particularly. One of the things I talked to her about yesterday, and that I know you've written about, is the way that the role she has played in this whole endless epic saga about Sable offshore oil and the pipeline and Refugio, which interestingly enough was the very first subject we talked about on the very first episode. I hate to keep coming back
We're
to
still talking about it. Yeah.
and we're still talking about it 10 years later. But she was actually very effective, I think, in this issue in terms of getting the community's voice heard, which had not really happened until she sort of stepped into it.
No, she really, in a very big way. I mean, she is great heart, but I think it was more her office organized a town hall gathering at the Coombs Junior High School, 2 or 3 months, 4 months ago, where 8 government department heads showed up in front of a room of hundreds of people to explain what oversight their departments had over Sable Oil's reapplication to restart a pipeline that had been shut down for 10 years. And the county of Santa Barbara basically totally abdicated this issue. We do not have any jurisdiction. They were under the threat of a lawsuit, and they said they settled. We don't have any jurisdiction. So the normal button that local members of the community had to push was gone. And so Monique and Greg both organized to create a button. And so that was what that meeting was. What was really interesting about the meeting is that the Environmental Defense Center was given a seat at the table, which nobody was really sure was going to happen. And they brought along Julia Louise-Dreyfus, a famous actor from Veep and Seinfeld, and she got up there and said, "I smell a rat." And the rat she was smelling was Sable. And she went on to explain why, and all the Sable guys, about 150 of them, got up, walked out of the room, said, "We don't need to take this crap." And they definitely got blindsided. And
yeah, but the key phrase there, seat at the table. The community did not have a seat at the table until that.
And she created a table around which the community could sit. And it was an imperfect table, and it remains that way. But what was striking to me is, going to Monique Limón and what kind of a president of the Senate she's going to be. My limited experience is she is highly careful about what she says. She measures her words with very tiny increments. She does not, whereas her predecessor, Hannah Beth Jackson, it was just whatever came to mind came out of her mouth. She was a natural order. And
she does admit to watching the show, so watch it.
Monique is like,
you're getting an email for that, Nick.
I know I am. She didn't say, "I resemble that remark." And Monique is so careful about what she says. So it was strikingly outspoken for her in her role to do that. And the governor and Bonta, the attorney general, have both stayed away from the issue, even though there's been many times where they could have helped. The general consensus amongst the environmental community is the governor is quietly putting his thumb on the scale on behalf of the oil company. Monique Limón is clearly not going that route.
Yeah.
And I know I'm jumping the gun here. The other person who just got appointed.
Oh, no, this is Josh. We got to let Josh take this.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's Josh. I got it.
No, this is the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon moment here, where we pivot, as Laura Capps like to say, to Josh's scoop on Meagan Harmon, City Council member Meagan Harmon, suddenly is, I don't know how suddenly, but ascending to the chair of the California Coastal Commission, which is, of course, in the middle of this wholesale fight as well. Josh, talk about Meagan.
Yeah, so council member Meagan Harmon, who famously on this show we've documented beat Doss Williams for that position to be on it as the local representative. And so now she's been appointed or voted by her peers to be a chair in kind of a shakeup on the Coastal Commission. And I guess to some people will be like, oh, it's the Coastal Commission and it's insider and whatever. I care more about, potholes. But right now, in this moment, the Coastal Commission is in the line of fire more so than we've ever seen it in terms of the federal government and also with Gavin Newsom, oddly, for slightly different reasons. But Trump has threatened to withhold some federal funding for California on the Trump administration on the condition that the Coastal Commission go away, right? So he thinks that it's too restrictive, that it guards against development too much, and of course, thank God for the Coastal Commission. I don't think that's liberal bias to to say that because the ocean is like, I mean, we need this agency to protect this open space for all of us because if we didn't have it, we know people would not naturally protect us, allow that access to the beach if they can't help it. And so at a time when the Trump administration is threatening federal funding, Meagan Harmon is in this position to push back. In addition, Democrat or Gavin Newsom is saying that the Coastal Commission is being too restrictive and they need to relax their normal high development standards in terms of rebuilding on the coast after the fires in LA. And so they're in the line of fire on two fronts among two people who feud with each other. And so Meagan Harmon is sort of at the center of this, in addition to all of the other stuff they deal with, whether it's Sable and offshore oil drilling, or even Elon Musk and the rockets. And he's sued the Coastal Commission because he wants to launch more rockets, and they're saying there's many problems with that potentially in terms of ocean debris. And here's our own Lompoc born Santa Barbara City Council member who, as you know, Jerry, you selected her. I remember going into that
was
meeting.
On the show too. That was on the show too.
You told me Meagan Harmon is going to get the appointment, and I laughed at you and said, "It's going to be
still using her husband's name." Then Nick, Josh, notes the Elon Musk Vandenberg rocket controversy, which is, I contend, the biggest undercovered story that we have. Of course, Meagan has recused herself on that.
She's recused herself because her father has some professional connection to one of the subcontractors, I believe, who are involved in that project up in Vandenberg.
Yeah, that sounds to me like Joan Hartman recusing herself on the pipeline. I'm about as convinced on those two as anything. All right, we gotta move along. I do want to ask about two related stories. Ask each of you. One, Josh, after some debate, the council decided to put $5 million into the city housing fund, and this is sort of happening on a parallel track. Nick, as you report that, is it the city, the county, or both that is redefining homelessness? What it means to be homeless? Okay, yeah. So,
but it will definitely trickle down very much into the city.
Can the two of you just sort of talk about those two interconnected issues? Josh, go first on the housing fund.
So the council passed a $577 million budget, but most of the discussion was centering on how much money do we want to put aside to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the Housing Trust Fund. And so there were several community groups who wanted $5 million. Some of the council members also. The staff had originally recommended 1.5, and then it went to 3, and eventually they decided to donate or to give 5 million total. They took $2 million from reserves, which coincidentally was it's been Meagan Harmon's idea for a few years now. Why do we have such high reserves? Let's take this money sitting in a bank and put it to use in the housing trust fund. That argument made a lot more sense before the recent stuff that has been going on and the potential that we might need some of those reserves. But nonetheless, they put aside $2 million for that. And so they have two funds. They have a homelessness and housing fund, and they have an affordable housing fund. So it was a very, very good debate, very good conversation. Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, who's normally very quiet and subdued and doesn't talk much in these meetings, had a good sort of comments. He's sort of talking about his concerns about what we're seeing in LA and the National Guard and federal authorities, and if they're going to start to do things like that. And so he was sort of talking about we need to be cautious with the reserves, but he ultimately decided to support the effort and donate the 2 million. So this is a big deal because Santa Barbara has been behind in terms of having a designated housing fund since the redevelopment agency went away. So they can use this money, give it to the housing authority. They can leverage that and turn that into double or triple the amount, which can lead to affordable housing projects down the road. Randy Rouse is making a lot of enemies. It's going to be a very interesting mayoral race. He is not supportive of this. He doesn't. He thinks we shouldn't be taking from the reserves. This is a 2-year plan. Then they're going to revisit it. But I think it's interesting that
we used to call that fiscal conservatism, but never mind. Okay.
Yeah, he would say that too. He's being fiscally conservative, but I think that in this community, housing is the big issue, and so it's hard to. You got to be really skilled to make that argument and not offend a lot of the activists who are out there. And Kristen Sneddon, she may run for mayor. I don't know, and she's on the front line. She wants rent stabilization or control or whatever you want to call it. So it's going to be a big battle.
It's going to be a big
I
battle.
don't think Randy has gained support since he was elected last.
No, I
I
agree.
think he is probably lost, and that's not a judgment on him. It's just reading the room. So it'll be interesting to see who runs.
Yeah, what did he win with? 37%? That's all he needs. Hey, Nick,
I think
Nick,
Randy.
Incorporate your comments into this question I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
Again, going back 10 years, we've had this debate, conversation, whatever, homelessness. Is it about addiction or is it about housing? And it's kind of back and forth. And I found your story interesting about sort of changing, what it means to be homeless, because it seemed that there was sort of a slight push toward the addiction side of that debate. No?
I think there's addiction, mental health issues are both extremely large. I think
but those two versus housing.
It's kind of a big shoe, and you can't really extricate one ingredient from the other. I think
that's what we do here on Newsmakers. We simplify the hell out of everything,
and so
oversimplify.
What was really striking, there was a big report given by to the county supervisors on Tuesday about, let's look back at the last 4 years. The county of Santa Barbara has taken about 78 million of federal and state dollars that have come through kind of one-time funds. And you've had the money and you've had political will, and they have built all kinds of these new micro villages with these prefab homes. Or the idea being if you have a door and you have a door you can lock, you will go in it, as opposed to going into a big shelter where you're hanging out and breathing in the fumes of all the people next to you. And so they've built on the South Coast and up in Santa Maria, a lot of this, they've done a lot. But what they have found for all that they have done, the number of new people coming in to the system, first time, saying, hey, I'm homeless and I need some help, that number is bigger than all the people, which is a large number, like 1,700, that they have gotten off the streets and into housing. So the gap between, the number of people that got off the streets and the new people on them is getting smaller. But what's really sobering, to use a bad word, is the persistence of the problem, no matter, the political will was there, the resources were there, the ingenuity was there. To the extent that government can solve anything, they were trying.
And that's that. I mean, and that's, I don't want to get into it today, but I mean, and that goes to my argument that homelessness is not an issue we can build our way out of.
I don't think you can build it is. I mean, we don't have enough mental health facilities here. We don't have enough addiction facilities. I mean, it's there's a lot of stuff we don't have.
All right. As they say over at the Bulwark, good show, long show. But before we leave, Josh, I do want you to say a word about Liz Hamel. Everybody out at UCSB is going to graduate over the weekend. Everybody's happy, having a good time. And I was very proud of you for getting that in, that the family is still like, wait a minute, help, give us some information. And we're still nowhere on that. Henry Yang is missing. We didn't get a chance to talk about that, Nick, about his lack of a replacement. We'll do that next time. But do say a word about Liz.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to carve a little more time to do kind of a deeper dive into all of the missteps on this case. But the private investigator and the attorney put out a press release and said, "Hey, the quarter's over. Everyone's going to leave. Please, we need to help solve what happened to Liz Hamel, who died. She fell Valentine's Day. She died 6 days later, and
she may or may not have fallen.
Yeah, she may or may not have fallen. They found her. They surmised. But the thing is that this investigation is being held or is being done by the UC Police Department, and it's crickets. I mean, nothing. And so this family hired a private investigator. They released photos of the last guy with Liz Hamel. There was a cell phone photo, held a big press conference, and said, "Do you know him?" And then from that, this guy was identified. I don't know whether he came forward or someone else did, because they're not talking about that. And UCPD interviewed him, and that's it. No statement, no comment. There, nothing like this guy's clear or he had nothing to do with it. No arrest, nothing at all. Just this silence. And so what the family is doing is saying they released where he's from. He's from Palos Verdes, and they were trying to contact Palos Verdes media to see, maybe somebody knows something there. So that is where we're at. Liz Hamel, 18-year-old freshman at UCSB from Bellevue, Washington. She's out celebrating at Lao Wang, and she leaves with a guy who she never met before and no one knew. And then 21 minutes later, she's found on the ground, and 6 days later, she dies. And there is zero public information on this. And so it's like, this is someone's daughter. This is an 18-year-old. I mean, how can everyone be so laxed about getting this information out? So much so the family hired a private investigator to figure it out.
Let me jump in, because you make a really good point. I mean, ongoing investigations, law enforcement is typically pretty tight-lipped. That's customary. But when you hit a dead end, law enforcement also goes, hey, when that woman in Montecito was killed in her home and smothered with a pillow, they put out like a $10,000 reward for information. That was the sheriff's department. So people can ring the bell. So just to highlight what a tight, constricted, constipated flow of information Henry Yang and UCSB operates with. I asked Cici Reyes, the public information officer for UCSB, What is the chancellor's last day as the chancellor? Simple. What is the last day? I'm sorry, I can't answer that. You have to get that information from the University of California Office of the President up in Oakland. Simple little question. Can't answer it. And there's, I'm probably picking on Kiki Reyes there, but that is so emblematic of the talk to the hand. I mean, Jerry, you worked for Wendy McCall, who was famous for talk to the hand. Henry Yang is talk to the hand. One interview with this paper in 31 years.
Yeah. And that, dear viewers, is why local news matters. Because without reporters like Josh and Nick trying to hold to account, people who have power are not going to hear about these kinds of things. So on that note, Josh, thank you. Nick, thank you. Thank you all for watching. And we'll see you on episode 502. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.